how do we approach medicine, which is fundamentally about getting rid of what's wrong with people, treating illness, treating disease, while also really promoting what is best within people?
Welcome back to Being in Medicine, everyone. We are super excited to have you here listening to us today. We have an awesome guest with us. Her name is Dr. Jordyn Feingold. She has all kinds of experience that we're going to love to talk about today. She's completed her adult psychiatry residency. She's currently a fellow for child and adolescent psychiatry. She's also completed a master's in applied positive psychology. So welcome, Jordyn. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Corey. Thanks, Jeff. I'm delighted.
Yeah, we are excited to have you. And I know we're going to have some awesome conversation today. So we're going to dive right into it. How's that sound? So you have a master's in applied positive psychology, and now you have done all of the work in the world of psychiatry. How do you blend those two things together?
Yeah, this is what I spend a lot of my time thinking about, which is how do we approach medicine, which is fundamentally about getting rid of what's wrong with people, treating illness, treating disease, while also really promoting what is best within people.
Yeah.
And I came into, as a kid, I knew I wanted to be a doctor because I really wanted to help people be healthy. And I thought that's what medicine was all about. And it wasn't until I actually discovered that positive psychology existed as a field when I was an undergrad, and I learned about this science of well-being and human flourishing, that I realized that actually what we do in healthcare really is about treating sickness,
right,
and getting people sort of to a state of like getting them from -10 to 0, rather than necessarily getting them from 0 to +10, if we think about it very simplistically on just a number line. So I ended up discovering positive psychology and realizing that I still wanted to be a doctor, but I wanted to infuse medicine with this different paradigm. And so I studied positive psychology under Martin Seligman, the founder of the field at Penn. And then I went right to medical school.
That's amazing.
So it was a very quick succession. I really haven't stopped being in the classroom for, since my education started. But that's really been the question. How do we integrate this into our healthcare system? And, more specifically for me now, how do we integrate this into the mental health fields and into psychiatric practice? Unfortunately, very tragically, the third day of my medical school classes back in 2016, I was fresh off my master's. I had just written my capstone project on toward a positive medicine, healing our healers from burnout to flourishing, and creating this new paradigm of how do we take care of ourselves as healers and be conduits of healing and well-being for our patients. We had a suicide at my medical school.
Wow.
Yeah. So this was like, I had just studied this. I had just seen all the statistics on how prevalent physician suicide was. And then day 3, we're confronted with this in a very real way. And the work started that day, where my medical school in New York City assembled a task force to really understand how do we implement more well-being in the learning environment and increase our mental health services and really look at the academic culture of our school. And that led to all sorts of things. And I think the biggest was a well-being program for all of the medical students that was peer-to-peer. It was actually called the Peers Program, Practice Enhancement, Engagement, Resilience, and Support, which was created by myself and some other students, and was all about teaching positive psychology skills to med students in real time throughout the course of their education across the 4 years of medical education. So this was really exciting to get to work on and develop and begin to teach doctors in training some of the fundamental skills of well-being science, because that really does not exist elsewhere in medical school curricula.
Right. Absolutely. So
So
tell us a little bit about that program. What skills, what things were you able to put into place?
sure. So it, as we conceptualized it, it was about 10 sessions, and it's now since grown to the residencies at my institution and all sorts
Mm,
of different training programs, the PhD program as well. But the fundamental skills are, the basis of the program is peer-to-peer support, creating a space within the medical school or training day
yeah,
where you just have an opportunity to be with one another,
yeah,
go to our podcast title here, and meet the learners wherever they're at. There's always a curriculum, and we really train our facilitators to balance structure with flexibility, what's happening in the room. So topics are everything from identifying and living by our values, understanding
mm,
what matters to me, what brought me
yeah,
here to medical school or training or my scientific career, and how am I already living by those values, and where can we close the gaps
right,
to live more deliberately by our values on a day-to-day basis, like really concretely, like where in my
yeah,
calendar can I infuse something that's more values based. So
yeah,
that's one session.
that's
Another
amazing.
session, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're really powerful. We
yeah,
have another session that builds off of the values, which is about character strengths, which are sometimes thought
mm,
of as our sort of values in action. How do
yeah.
those values show up in our character? And we teach the VIA model. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with the VIA strengths paradigm?
No, no, enlighten us, share with me.
Yes. So this was one of positive psychology's first endeavors back in the 1990s, was to create an inventory of strengths, of
Sure.
character strengths. What can go right with the human experience, right?
Yeah.
If the psychiatric Bible or DSM clarifies everything that can go wrong, and sorry, my cooking device is going off in there if you hear a
Okay.
beeping noise. So the scientists in positive psychology sought to really identify the preeminent, all of the character strains that exist across people, across cultures, across the world, all ages and places on the planet. And they came up with this inventory of 24 character strengths. And these are things like appreciation of beauty and excellence,
Uh,
bravery, curiosity, love of learning, social intelligence, humor, hope, and there's 24 of them, and
sure.
we teach this language to the medical students, and then we invite them to identify what they think their top strengths are, which are sometimes called their signature strengths.
Sure.
And then we have the students identify what the fellow students think that those learners strengths are.
Mm,
So it ends up being this beautiful strength spotting activity where we have students going around telling, Corey, I think one of your top strengths is perseverance, and here's why. Here's where I've seen it come up. And by the end of the session, everyone actually has written feedback about their top strengths perceived by
wow.
their peers.
Yeah.
And it's so not how things typically go in
Right.
healthcare settings, where we're
Mm,
so acutely focused on what's going wrong, how do we eliminate and detect threats,
right.
right?
Yeah.
And so we sort of practice dissecting wellness just as we learn in our training to dissect illness. So
Wow.
that's just a few examples of some of the content we do
Yeah.
in the peers program, and it's just so fundamentally different from most things that we do in medical training.
That's amazing. So so then, okay, you have these curated sessions and you work through and you
Yep.
get this stuff. So then how do you carry that through medical school? How do you carry that?
Yeah.
What are the touch points along the way?
Yeah. So with this program, we meet with the learners about twice for the medical students every
Okay.
year. So there's 2 sessions a year, and so that's like approximately 8 sessions, and then there's an orientation session, which is where we get 9, and then a final sort of concluding session on
Sure.
gratitude and sending a
Yeah.
gratitude letter at the very end. And then in the way we designed it for the residency programs, it's a once monthly session where residents
Awesome.
go during lunch, And they have facilitators from their peer facilitators within the program who facilitate, and again, always balancing structure with flexibility. You know, if the residents are absolutely exhausted and, you know, going through something, they just came off of the floors and there was a really tragic case, or, you know, what have you, as these things happen in clinical practice. It's always about first doing a check-in. We always start with a mindfulness activity to really get everyone sort of, our nervous system's regulated and on the same page, and then go from there, be it with the structured activity or riffing based on what the trainees need. And, you know, we designed this such that these skills are for, first and foremost, for the learners, for the healthcare workers who are learning the skills. But some of them are really transferable to clinical practice. So the secondary goal is that as doctors, we can actually use some of these skills with our clinical teams, with our patients. So, for example, signature strengths and character strengths identification is something I do with most of my patients, both adults and children. And I'm actually building out a broader intervention currently in fellowship to teach this character strength skill to child and adolescent clinicians in our state system. So, you know, I love teaching these concepts, and I think that there's so much relevance in clinical practice, both for ourselves and our well-being as clinicians, but also to really augment the toolkit we can use with our patients to focus on more than just what's wrong with them, but really what's working and what's right with them.
Absolutely, because there's so much to talk about there. I could pause, right? Because we're focused on, you know, symptom reduction or treating the disease, and, you know, how do we? You mentioned a couple of times language, using language and so forth, and so how do you use language and practices from that program? And you said you're building this out in your current practice. You know, how do you move people? Because I'm imagining you're looking to implement something that's moving people towards more growth and meaning, purpose, like you talked about, right? So tell us a little bit about that, and then I'm gonna have to pause, and Jeff and I are probably gonna have like 20 minutes of questions. So
it's such a great question, and, you know, this is infinitely fascinating to me. So I could talk about this for hours. So I think one of the topics that ends up coming into what I teach my students, fellow healthcare workers, and what I teach my patients, it starts with just normalizing the negativity bias. Are you too familiar with the negativity bias?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
So it is so ingrained with us throughout our human evolution.
For the listeners, tell us a little bit. Give us a little bit of what that means.
Yes, giving you a primer on the negativity bias. So throughout evolution, we obviously adapted to worlds which were a lot less, shall I say, cushion comfortable than most modern society is today. And certainly that's, you know, obviously that is not true of everywhere on the planet, but in general, right, the humans evolved hunting and gathering for food, living on the land with predators, and existing in conditions that were far more brutish and aggressive than they are typically today. And as such, in order to live to an age where you were able to survive and reproduce, you had to be very attuned to threats to human life and welfare and your safety. So the optimistic, you know, ancient human who was looking up at the sky at the beautiful sunset and, you know, and looking at all of the positives and not being as attuned to the negative, the threats, the saber-toothed tiger lurking in the corner, was not going to necessarily live to an age where they would survive and reproduce. So over hundreds of thousands of years of our evolution, humans have evolved to really overvalue negative stimuli in the environment as a means of survival.
Right.
So we see this today where our bodies and our nervous systems don't necessarily have the ability to distinguish threats to our life, things that will kill us, from threats just to our ego. right? So that dish in the sink that our partner did not wash can feel as threatening as something that, was actually a threat to our well-being. Both can be so triggering to the nervous system. And so this is a normal part of, it's a typical part of human development that our brains have a bias towards focusing on the negative.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this quote, I think it's attributable to Rick Hansen, that we are like Velcro for the negative and Teflon for the positive. The positive things that happen to us, they just roll right off and we continue about our day. But the negative things that happen, they really stick to us and they're more salient. So we have to learn strategies to overcome that vestigial negativity bias that remains with us, while being more even-handed and paying really close attention to the good stuff to build more of it. And with practice and things we call in positive psychology, positive interventions, we can really retrain our brains not to ignore the negative or suppress it or live in this world of toxic positivity where we can pretend that the negative stuff doesn't exist.
Right.
We can increase our well-being by being more even-handed about focusing on the good things all around us.
Yeah, that's amazing. Jeff, there is a lot there to unpack. So what do you have coming up for you?
So much. I had a question about the healthcare workers. The PEERS program is primarily oriented towards filling one's own cup and staying whole and complete. And it can be translatable, as you stated, into medical practice and being with patients in a way that, as you do, you speak the positivity that you see in your patients and back it up and put language to it. When one is with a patient that way, where we accentuate, identify, speak to, and develop in them an understanding of how we see their positive values or positive characteristics, how does that translate into improved health outcomes, or does it? What do you see happening there?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, it can really enhance the therapeutic alliance. Patients feel seen and validated. And obviously you can't come in hot to a patient who's very depressed and start naming all of their positive characteristics and, doing it in sort of an oppressive way that's not meeting them where they're at, right? That would be entirely invalidating and they will not feel particularly seen. But when done genuinely in service of fostering a connection, helping them build autonomy, helping them understand, wait, I lost a lot. I lost 20 pounds 5 years ago. I know what I'm doing. I've been successful at this before, and helping them really understand, how did you do it? That's really hard to do. Let's look at the ingredients that fostered your success in that. And let's figure out together what structures we can put in place so you can do that again, right? By building on past successes, by really seeing them for the whole people that they are, it can foster that sense of trust. And we know that, patients who feel seen and have a great relationship with their physicians, they do better, they have better outcomes, and they have less, I love working with patients with functional syndromes and, functional GI disorders, now called disorders of gut-brain interaction. And one of the most important prognostic indicators is the quality of the relationship that these folks have with their doctors, that they feel seen, feel valued. It's one of the most important ingredients in psychotherapy. It's why I feel quite confident that AI is not going to take over my work, because it's all about the person, the human interaction.
Right. Beautiful. Right. Absolutely. Yeah, it's very, it's just a fascinating topic, especially how you're melding together the positive psychology and the psychiatry aspects of this. What would you say is like the biggest opportunity for us to explore this even deeper in terms of medicine, and where should what is the opportunity there?
Yeah, it's a really important question, because healthcare is going to be changing quite drastically in our careers and certainly in our lifetime with all of the advances in technology. And I really think it is about really understanding as clinicians and as a field, what are the things that are fundamentally human about our job when so much else can actually be offloaded to devices and machines and artificial and super intelligence, right? Like, how do we really dig our heels into the human side of medicine and in healing, which I believe happens first and foremost in relationship and through accountability. And how do we actually, not to short shift our clinical reasoning, which I think is even more important now than ever because it's so easy to rely on tools to think for us. But how do we augment our training and our practice to truly focus on the human elements, the compassion, the partnership, the being with our patients, sometimes just like sharing a physical space with them through what they're going through.
Yeah, we have moved. Healthcare has become very transactional, it feels like, and we're missing that human-centered approach. Or that's kind of where I feel we need to get back to, and what we kind of been. That's what this podcast has been starting to talk about, right? Is being more present with people in creating relationship and being more human-centered in that particular way. So, Jeff, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, a thought experiment. So if human beings evolved such that a negativity bias was preservational, allowed us to pass on our genes, and now that we live in hopefully a safer environment, could an intentionally created positivity bias actually serve us more powerfully as we create the future?
That's fascinating.
I think what's so important is that there's a balance of the two forces, right? That because there is such thing as pathological positivity, right? Where we're actually ignoring problems and acting as if they don't exist. And when we do that, things can really fester and get out of control. And then they end up worse than they would have been if we didn't ignore them. So I don't think it's necessarily about, well, let me present this to you. There's a parable in positive psychology that James Pawelski, who is the director of the MAPP program, developed. And I love it. And I use this in my teaching all the time, and I'll present it to you. So this is oversimplified and the quick version, but I call this the tale of two capes. I forget what he titles it. And the idea is there's a girl and she kicks over a bottle as she's walking down the street, and a genie comes out. And the genie says, "I'm going to turn you into a superhero." And she says, that sounds cool. I love superheroes. I would love to be one. And he says, "You have a choice. I can make you a red cape superhero or a green cape superhero." And he explains further. The red cape superhero is capable of getting rid of all of the badness in the world: famine, war, poverty. Just get rid of all of it. And she thinks, that's pretty good. How could I resist that? What's the alternative? He says, then there's the green cape superhero. The green cape superhero is capable of growing goodness in the world: prosperity, peace, hope. And she says, wow, I'm not sure. Now you have me thinking. So let me ask you, you both, do you have a thought? Would you want to be the red cape superhero or the green cape superhero? Or is there another option where you don't want to decide?
Could we be a team? One must be red and one must be green.
I love that. You can absolutely.
We kicked over the together, Jeff. We both got an option, right?
Very good.
Yeah, I guess for me, that's a very interesting. For me, it aligns to be the green, to take on the green, and to live in that space, that positive space, and grow what is good in the world. But I can see the value of the red cape so much. So right. It's a great question. Jeff,
so you're saying there's a balance. Is that your point?
well, as Pawelski continues, he says, what's so interesting about the green cape superhero is that sometimes by adding good, we eliminate the need to target the bad. And the example he gives is, when you see a child is crying, they just scrape their knee or lost it, something that was meaningful to them. We could take the red cape approach and say, stop crying, or we can make a funny face and make them laugh. And by taking that green cape approach, of by adding that humor and the laughter, they actually stop crying, right? So when we have to think about, when can we be the green cape superhero and stop trying to just fight violence with violence, which often leads to more violence, and add more good. However, we can't ignore the problems in the world, and sometimes just adding something will not be sufficient to get rid of the problem, right? I can prescribe psychotherapy and cognitive behavioral therapy to help my patient with cancer cope with their illness. And if we don't use chemotherapy and we don't use radiation for something that's needed, we are going to set them up for failure. So it really is, as Jeff predicted, about that balance. We have to have a reversible cape. There has to be a third option living in that gray area, where what we need is the wisdom to know when to use each side.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
I'll look for the reversible cape.
Exactly. And this is a theme that James, he's such a master teacher. It goes all the way throughout our curriculum. We're always thinking about how do we use the red cape? How do we use the green cape in a balance? And he actually has a cape that has two sides. It's pretty epic.
It seems like the balance makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And at the same time, we're told that if we're leading someone and we have something that, say they didn't do it the way we want it done, and we want to report it effectively it's a negative, but we want to frame it up in a way that doesn't cause an ego harm, that you're supposed to have some number, the ratio of 7-to-1, 7 positivities for every negativity, for them to perceive it as a balance.
Yeah.
And that's the negativity bias in action, right? We know it takes, the ratio, it used to be 5-to-1. That was kind of a bet, the research on it wasn't as great as we'd want it to be. Whatever the ratio is, we know we need more positive to overcome the negative because of that bias. Yeah. And we have to be deliberate around how we communicate. And what I loved about how you even asked that question, Jeff, you started with an and. You built off what I was saying. Yeah. And that it's all about the and, that these things can exist at the same time. Mm-hmm. And part of the crux of what we know about resilience through challenge is that people who are the most resilient can actually have that mental flexibility to hold the bad with the good at the same time. So even though they may be facing a diagnosis or going through something considered traumatic, it's that ability to hold hope, to hold gratitude, to recognize the social support that's around them. So it may take more positive in quantity to overcome that negativity, and it's all about holding those two truths at the same time.
Yeah. That's interesting. Do you have any experience, or can you draw any examples of, building positive organizations, especially in healthcare, right? Like resilience. We talk about building resilient teams. What types of things, what strategies, what goes into building a resilient team specifically in healthcare?
Yeah. So this is not where I have the most experience, as I've been a fairly junior member of teams thus far as a trainee. However, I've really had the privilege of taking on leadership roles from a research perspective through the Office of Wellbeing and Resilience, where I was a medical student and a resident. And that was a brand new structure that came to be when I was a trainee. And I got to sort of watch that unfold. My mentor was our chief wellness officer. One of my mentors was our chief wellness officer. And that was so baked into the mission of all the work that they do and that we did on our research team. And I think that obviously, teams are human enterprises, right? And we create the culture. Yep. Something that we learned is support from the top matters so much for morale of the team members. Right. So how people feel supported by their leaders is huge, and one of the greatest predictors of engagement in an organization and on a team. And as a junior member of a team and having that beginner's mind throughout residency and my training, one of the best things that I got to do was feeling empowered to teach up and to be received by my supervisors to bring some of this work to my team. So one thing I did I think I was a medical student when I introduced sort of a gratitude circle at the end of the medicine rotation. So at the end of a 2-week block, and this was something our attending did, she got bagels and orange juice for us, to have during morning rounds, which was just something that's so nice, like not necessary, not expected, but it was a great 2 weeks with our team. And she decided to do that. And in that setting, I said, I know this might seem corny or cheesy, but this has been such a meaningful experience for me. I wonder if people are game to just share some gratitude about the rotation. Yeah. And every single person went around and participated in this. And it created this just like upward spiral for everyone, I think, for the rest of the day. And it's so tiny, but these little things, and it wouldn't have happened if our attending, the leader of the team, didn't offer to get bagels and orange juice for us. And it's so small, but these things really do make a big difference.
That's amazing. I love that. Yeah, that's fantastic. So in terms of building teams, building the support from the top, where do you feel like we have where do you see the biggest opportunity? Like you're talking about chief wellness officers, that is a growing trend in healthcare, is having chief wellness officers in health systems and so forth. What type of, or where did you see that program? Have more people incorporated that program into their residency programs, into their medical schools? Do you see more of those programs emerging in health systems with chief wellness officers? Do you have any background on how that's playing out?
So I don't have such a great sense of the national landscape and where all of those efforts are going. My understanding from what I do know is that a lot of it is about, there's this, I guess, controversy or discussion in sort of the well-being and burnout space about systemic interventions and really intervening at the systems level, at the highest levels of an institution, even, at the national level, thinking about things about reimbursements and EHR burden and insurance, working with insurance companies and demands on clinicians' time, right? There are these systemic, really high level interventions. And then there's sort of the day-to-day, very local cultures and access to resources, people feeling supported, the workplace culture and the way people respond to one another and what is the quality of the relationships like. And I think my understanding is a lot of chief wellness officers are sort of responsible for that whole gamut. Right. And it's a ton to be on the plate of a single person. And then to be in a C-suite of an organization or wherever those people are held, to then be accountable to like the bottom line of an institution and make the case that what they're doing has some sort of value, some tangible value on productivity, on outcomes. It's a really challenging position to be in. And so I think all of that is to say, I think these roles are tremendously important, and they're, maybe like 7-8 years old now since the first ones really started. And I hope that they are figuring out how to do all of these things. I know I have like the most respect for my mentor, John Ripp, who's the chief wellness officer at Mount Sinai. And I know he's in a network with many of the chief wellness officers across the country who are taking a stab at this critically important work. But from where I'm standing, I don't have such an inside view of exactly what they're doing and how they're doing it. But I sure applaud them for the work that they're doing.
That's fantastic. That's great. Jeff, other questions? I've got some just rolling, but what are your any thoughts? I'll pause for you to contribute any questions.
I do have a burning question.
Yeah.
You've used the term a couple of times in our conversation today. Would you distinguish the term hope the way you use it?
So hope, it is a emotion, it's a character strength. I think we use it in lots of different ways. Actually, one of my patients yesterday, who we did his VIA strengths, and this was his number one strength. And I love just asking, what does this mean to you? The way I think about it, and this comes from the work of one of my dear friends and colleagues, Dan Tomasulo, who is a professor at Teachers College at Columbia. He wrote a great book on hope, and he talks about, it's not just believing that the best is going to happen or that something good will come tomorrow, but it's about understanding what our role in it is to make it happen. So there's this important sense of agency in it, that it's not just blind optimism of, hopefully this will work out, right? Like, let me just pray and, put it out of my mind. But it's really believing that something is possible with our own engagement, our involvement, and the belief that we can actually affect change.
Love it. Thank you.
Yeah. I love that. Possibility. That's fantastic. Yeah. So let's get back to maybe your practice, what you're developing, what you're building. Have you engaged with your colleagues in a way? Do you find people interested, engaged, or curious about how applied positive psychology fits and integrates into psychiatry?
Yes, I think there is such an appetite for this and a lot of excitement around it. And I think what we just need is the time to actually teach this at scale to trainees. So I was able to introduce this to my co-residents through the peers program in my residency. And now I'm just trying to find the time to teach this to my co-fellows in my community and fellowship, and like carve out time during our day of didactics every week to really teach this in as robust a way as I can. So I've written my proposal and I've advocated for 7 sessions to my training directors. I don't know if I'll be able to get 7 hours of time to teach my colleagues, but if I get 2 hours or even just 1 hour, I think it would be incredibly important to whet the appetite and help give them guidance on where they can go from there, and then talk online and through shared supervision opportunities outside of our formal training. But I walked into didactics the other day, and one of my co-fellows had listened to a podcast that Lori Santos, who's an amazing teacher, she's the positive psychology professor at Yale. She's an incredibly popular undergraduate course. And he was listening to her on a podcast, and she was talking about VIA strengths. And he came in and he was like, I just did this quiz online and I discovered what my strengths are. And I looked at him and I was like, this is so exciting. I'm so glad you discovered this. I'm getting ready to teach this to our class. And I looked at him and I said, Pranav, let me guess, your top strength is love. And he was like, oh my God, how did you know? That was my top strength. And I said, that's my top strength too. And throughout the year working with him, it's just so clear. He is just a bundle of love. And
that's amazing.
If he couldn't use love, he wouldn't be him. And it just like, then, our other co-fellow, Nick, was like, oh my God, I have to do this. And I want to know what my strengths are. And it builds so much buzz, and there was just so much energy in the room. And I was simultaneously so excited. I was like, yes, take the VIA. And then at the same time, I was like, but like, I'm going to teach this to you in a few months. Like, let's, not jump the gun. But at the end of the day, just getting the enthusiasm around this and getting my colleagues informed and excited. Like, I want to catalyze just everyone learning about this and scaling it and disseminating it as far as possible, because we really do need more focus on this in psychiatry and in medicine more broadly.
Yeah, especially broadly in medicine, right? I mean, Jeff works in orthopedics. We work in different areas. If you were to trim it down to creating some curiosity for people in other areas of medicine. What would you suggest someone like Jeff tell his colleagues in the world of orthopedics that would get them possibly curious in this science?
Well, I'd say to Jeff, you got to do it where the people are at. So it's probably in the operating room when you're standing around your table, right? And you're actually, because this can't just feel like an add-on where you're seeing patients in clinic, then you're operating all day. You want to get home to your family. You want to get home to your friends, your hobbies. You want to be golfing on the weekends. You don't want to be sitting by your computer doing a module learning about positive psychology, because frankly, that defeats the point. Because right, that is one thing I've learned, is that people don't want another checkbox or some
right.
requirement coming down from their administration saying, here's how to be happy. Because guess what? You know what makes you happy, right? You know what it is. And part of the problem is that your job takes away so much time from the things that make you well. So we have to build it in. We can't just layer it on, or else people resent it, and then we're never going to learn anything. So actually, I had the biggest impact, I would say, with surgeons when I was a medical student rotating on surgery. Frankly, I knew I was not going to be a surgeon, and I was quite forthcoming about that. But then my supervisor would say, so what do you want to do? And I say, well, I'm really interested in psychiatry and mental health, and frankly, teaching wellness to other doctors. And across the board, the anesthesiologists, the surgeons were like, I need that so badly. Tell me more. Right. Like how do I get, how does this get better? Like, what can I do? There was such an appetite for it, and being able to actually talk to them about it while we were in the operating room and I was retracting for them. I mean, it was really therapeutic. I don't know if there is a way to scale that and actually put psychiatrists or trained clinicians who know how to be in an operating room and know positive psychology in the clinical setting. But I think that would be pretty brilliant. You got to bring the intervention to the people where they're at without it taking more time out of their day.
You got to build it into the workflow in the course of their day. Right.
If you actually build it into the workplace environment, then maybe we upgrade the workplace environment to being the place that doesn't take away from our happiness. But instead of work-life balance, we got work-life harmony.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. Jeff, other thoughts that are coming to you in this moment?
Nothing in this moment is coming to me, but this is a very brilliant conversation. Thanks for leading it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's shift to so that's about the clinicians, the physicians, the team, so to speak. What about speaking to the administrators? Building a positive organization, and I know that's not necessarily been your, but you've studied this, you've been in that, right? You've learned. What would you tell them in terms of why this is important? Why is this important for their organization?
Yeah. So it is incredibly costly to turn over physicians or clinical personnel. I think it takes the latest, I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but as of the last time a few years ago, it's like $500,000 at minimum, probably, in costs to replace a physician. Just lost time, incentive bonuses to bring on someone new, training, onboarding. It's incredibly costly. You want to retain your people. You want to retain the best talent. You don't want hospital B next door to come scoop up your best clinicians because they have happier workplaces than you do. So it really behooves organizations to create places where people want to work and people want to stay. And what we know is that clinicians who are well have better connections with their patients, right? Patients are more satisfied. So if there is a way to really quantify the cost savings and the opportunities of, like, for an institution to, generate income on the well-being of their organizations, I think that is very compelling to people at the top, because at the end of the day, I imagine that's where their pressures are. And it's just the right thing to do. I think just appealing to the morality, right? This is just the right thing to do. We are in the business of taking care of people, and we have to take care of the people who we are putting in charge of that task.
Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that insight. I appreciate that very much. Yeah. What haven't we talked about that you're like, man, we missed the boat on this? Is there anything that we haven't talked about yet?
You know, talking about this stuff inherently opens my mind. So, and what we know is that positive affect is very broadening. So I don't feel like there's one pathway. There's, a lot of pathways. I mean, I work with children, and, we were all children once. Many of you have children. We're all thinking about like the next generation and the well-being of our kids. And what we know is that parent well-being is so critical for the well-being of our kids. Yeah. And when we think about just the next generation, the people that I'm working with, so rarely are my patients these kids, right? The problems are often not just about them, right? It's about the family systems they're embedded in, the anxiety they pick up on in the culture from their parents, right? So this is, if not for ourselves, if not for our patients, it's like, this is for our children, for the future of our society, right? I think like the well-being imperative is, I just see it every day with these kids. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. So many reasons to do it. So many reasons to learn about it and to get curious about it and to explore the positive nature of it, right? From patient outcomes to increasing team resilience to decreasing physician and caregiver burnout. Doing this sort of work has effects way beyond what you can measure. And sometimes Jeff and I get into, sometimes we only value things we can measure, but finding ways to measure the value of this mindfulness and this presence and this well-being is the right thing to do in the long run, right? Absolutely. So, well, thank you, Jordyn, for being here and sharing all of this brilliant information. They can find you at jordynfeingold.com, learn more about it. I'm sure I don't know if you have references there on your website, but, applied positive psychology is a very interesting and very powerful science to be engaged in. So I encourage everyone to go out there and read that. And I just want to acknowledge you for all the work that you're doing and, merging these two things together in your world of psychiatry and your applied positive psychology work. And just thank you for the impact you're having on those around you and the systems that you're in and the schools that you're part of. And I hope and I watch and I imagine that this will grow and explore and expand, into beyond where you're just at, but into the natural being of medicine. So thank you for being here and thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much for having me. And I genuinely hope and will be part of making that happen. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you both. I know you're beautiful. Yeah. Thanks, Jordyn. Well, thanks, Jeff, for participating. Appreciate you being here. Thanks you, Jordyn, again. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And check us out next time as we explore being in medicine. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.